Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r slash Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, huge change to our infrastructure because why? Rule number 1000000000000, why backups are important. I learnt it the hard way. You can lead a man to knowledge, but beating him incessantly over the head with it won't make him learn. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Huge change to our infrastructure because why? Creative destruction certainly has its place in things, heck, I've used it myself a time or two. But the old adage, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, also has its place in the toolkit. Anyway, back in the mists of time, I was in charge of a small tech support group for an academic department at a public university. I had inherited a pretty cool setup, lots of automation for server and desktop maintenance, a desktop cloning setup that was pretty sweet and scalable, a ton of documentation on how everything worked, which made training new employees fairly easy. Anyway, it was a pretty solid setup. Not perfect, and always needing incremental upgrades, but it was pretty robust, and it worked. Then the powers that be decided things needed to be shaken up. One of the faculty had some grant funding to hire someone part-time for his research, database stuff IIRC. The person they hired would also be working with my group part-time, which would make him a full-time employee. New guy Ing was pretty smart, but very much liked doing things his way. He had a skill set geared towards a different Linux distro than the one we used, and he started advocating for us to change over. I had several discussions with him over the practicalities of this. All our automation, cloning, and documentation would have to be rebuilt. We would be undertaking a huge amount of work, at the end of which he would have an environment he was more comfortable in, and all the rest of us would be on learning curve to some extent. Functionally, our setup would be more or less the same, not better or worse. It seemed to me that this would involve a huge amount of work, potential outages, and for what? However, NG had some faculty members that really liked him. He was the new broom, I was the old stick in the mud. So I had to be very careful when handling this situation. I didn't badmouth his ideas in public, tried to say things like interesting idea, we need to look at it. Then hopefully no one would follow up and I could forget it. But NG had the bit between his teeth and scheduled a meeting with my group and interested faculty. He made up handouts to give everyone describing his vision and reasons why it would be better. My coworker and I were very careful not to be negative when the agenda came up. We were mildly positive or neutral. But I was concerned since I really didn't want to change. I got the distinct impression the NG was using this job to build his resume and would not be around long. Finally, the day arrived and we all marched into a conference room to hear NG's presentation. He did a pretty good job, had slides, the whole enchilada. I just sat quietly and listened attentively. Finally, NG wrapped up and took questions from the various professors who had come. Then one of the professors asked me what I thought. I had been thinking about my response, and while I wanted to say it was one of the stupidest ideas I'd ever heard, I very calmly replied that I was sure we could do all this conversion, but I was concerned about loss of our automation tools and the requirement to either build new ones or modify the old ones. Another professor asked me to explain and I walked through how we managed things, version control, automation, replication/cloning, we had it down pat. I could spin up a server from cold iron in minutes. Need to install 10 new Linux desktops? Let me get them out of the box, I can image them as fast as our network will allow. I wasn't really being critical of NG, just pointing out that switching distros was going to be less than half the project. I was more or less holding my breath, and I could tell my co-worker, who felt the same as me, was also on the edge of his seat. There were two professors in the meeting that were very system-oriented, they knew what it meant to run the plethora of services we did, it wasn't a magic black box to them. One of them, my boss, mildly stated that seemed that switching would not be worth the effort. Another professor, who I was more worried about since he really liked new stuff and ideas, chimed in that he agreed. The cost of conversion was not worth the effort. NG took it pretty well, and co-worker and I went out to lunch and marveled about how we had dodged a huge bullet. NG shortly got involved in a campus-wide IT project which he found very frustrating since the other folks involved wouldn't do what he suggested. In fact, he mostly alienated the other folks involved, but he would come back from meetings and tell me that those other folks might get fired for obstructing things. NG ended up leaving not too long after that, leaving me a handful of servers running his favorite distro, which I converted to our standard image as soon as I could. Rule number 1000000000000: why backups are important. I learnt it the hard way. Greetings to the wonderful folks at Tales from Tech Support. Long-time lurker in this sub, the below incident occurred about 3 days back, am still recovering from it. Usual disclaimers: English is not my first language, so please excuse any slip-ups. Please revert back to me if you face any problems. 1,000 apologies. I have a portable version of KeePass, a single .kdbx database with a key file, set up like this. It will be important later. Computer has only the database file. 2 pen drives have both the database file and key file. So, whenever I need to access the database, one pen drive is plugged into the computer for the key file, pen drive plugged into the Android phone directly, using the OTG cable. The password is copy/pasted as needed, pen drive is unplugged safely. A few days back, I tried accessing the database in a Linux VM, using keepsxc, and it kept throwing a warning message that the key file was outdated, etc. So, I went ahead and changed the key file to the newer format, .keeks. So far, so good. While changing the password, KeePass threw up a message saying that the password was weak, it's about 20 characters long, and asked me whether I should continue / I wanted to change it, etc. I ignored the message, but then thought, why not change the password to say something like 64 characters? A small note here: I have been using the same master password for years safely. Here is where things got ket up big time. I changed the password and key file, everything was working great. I copy/pasted the 64 character password, FYI. Wow. Awesome. Works fine. Then, the goof up. I will never know where exactly I messed up, not even willing to experiment at this point. I deleted the old databases in both the pen drives and overwrote the files. Now, the database was the same in all 3 places with the new key file. Then tried opening the database. The dreaded error message failed to load the specified file. The master key is invalid. Make sure that the master key is correct and try it again came up. Even then, I was calm, of course. I must have copy/pasted it incorrectly and tried it again in all 3 devices. The thing kept throwing up the error message. Tried typing the password, nope, not working. I literally stopped breathing and went into full-blown panic mode. This database had all the passwords: banks, demat account, mutual funds, crypto wallet, every password and username that I and my family use. It also stored the passwords of my wife's bank and stuff. I was on the floor, begging to the gods, whatever forces were out there, to help me out. My wife was unaware of all this drama. To add to the agony, I had used the eraser software to securely delete the older databases / key files from the pen drives, even though I was able to access the older database in the computer using the Restore Previous Version option in Windows 10. Without the old key file, it was useless. Was there no way out of this mess? About 20 minutes must have passed on, and I think I must have lost about 10 years of my life at that point. If a writer had been present in my room, I guess she would have described me like this: he had a look of horror, tinged with sadness on his face. All his efforts were in vain. That was me at that moment. My wife did step in briefly to discuss something and noted that my face was different. I had to pretend very hard to keep a cool face. Thankfully, our 5-year-old kid stepped in at this point and both of them left the room. I knew that there were data recovery services out there, but before that, I wanted to try to retrieve the files myself. A quick Google search led me to Wondershare File Recovery, and while the software did show the missing files, it said that I needed to pay an amount to get the full version. Okay, let's try one more time before going for a paid solution. I downloaded Kernel Data Recovery, which showed the missing files and asked whether these could be recovered. They have a 1 GB file limit, which can be recovered for free. This was the moment. Would the database and key file work properly? Was it corrupted? All kinds of thoughts were running in my head. The gods perhaps thought that I had learned a good lesson, and mercifully, everything worked perfectly as I was able to recover the files. I double-checked and found that all the usernames and passwords were there, in perfect condition. I let out a sigh of relief, which I am sure would have been heard in the entire universe. At this point, the Ode to Joy was playing in my head continuously. Okay, FreeIdiot40x2, you messed up and now, you've got another lifeline. No more adventures. Before doing these stunts, I had discussed about the password change with my wife. Both of us know the master password, and she had warned me not to go ahead with it. She felt that 64 characters were too long. Of course, when has any man obeyed the sane advice of his wife? /s. Her point of view was very simple and sensible. The old master password has been safe enough, using it for nearly 3 odd years. I don't back up using any cloud service. The usernames and passwords have not been used in external machines. All stuff is stored locally and under our control. We take all precautions, no matter which device we use. KeePass on Windows 10 and Android mostly. I believe this stuff is known as, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So, lots of lessons learned here. Most of it is obvious stuff. 1. No matter how old you are / how much of an expert you think are, there is a huge possibility that you will screw up. 2. Never delete old backups. They could save the day. I discovered an old KeePass backup in an external drive, but this dated back to 2018 and was downright useless. 3. Even if a file is securely deleted, it can be recovered. 4. For the love of God, please do not delete any backups until you are dead sure. Double check, triple check whether all stuff works fine before deleting them. Even then, keep a copy of the old database safely. I could go on, but you get the point. Oh, and test your backups once a week or so. Thanks for pointing that out, you /XKF21WNJ. Last thing anyone needs is the backup file being corrupt. P.S. Writing about this stuff triggered the unpleasant memories. Sorry for the long rant. If you've made it this far, great. Thank you for taking the time to read this completely. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully, you folks did not mess up this badly when it comes to backups. You can lead a man to knowledge, but beating him incessantly over the head with it won't make him learn. It is the time of year where my department starts conducting training for our company dealerships located all over the US and a few placed overseas. Last year the pandemic forced us to do it all totally online. This actually worked great for a few products, and those are now only going to be taught online going forward. I got assigned one of these to teach this year, and decided I should watch the recording from last year. This will let me figure out the format it used along with any updates or changes where I could make it better. This training talked about a topic for 5 to 7 minutes, asked some review questions the students answered in the Zoom chat, then allowed students to ask questions before moving on to topic 2 where the format repeated. Topic 1 was all about compatibility. It clearly and repeatedly states that controller A only works with option A and the newer controller B only works with option B. They look the same, but mix and match sh*t isn't going to fly. Then it moved on to the review questions where question 1 was if controller A would function with option B. Everyone typed NO in the comments like good little student, and on to the next question. When it was time for the students to ask questions, the first one to appear in the chat window was, all my option A's are on back order. Can I use the option B's to finish the installations instead? You could almost see the presenter die inside, because that is literally all he'd just been talking about.